Hey everyone, welcome back for another deep dive. You know how this works. We take something complex, we try to understand it. Today, we're diving into the whole world of frozen Russian assets. What happened to them, what could happen to them, the whole shebang. And our guide for this one is a Bloomberg article, Seizing Russian Assets Risks Unintended Outcomes, Euroclear says. Catchy title, right?
Definitely grabs your attention. And it's a timely topic, no doubt about it, because we're not just talking theory here. This is real money with very real global implications.
Right, like it's not just numbers on a screen. So let's jump right in. The article starts by talking about Valerie Urban, the CEO of Euroclear. Now, I know a lot of our listeners are probably familiar with Euroclear, but just to recap quickly, it's a big financial institution. And turns out they're holding a pretty significant chunk of those frozen Russian central bank assets. So what's Urban's take on this whole situation?
Well, she actually made some pretty interesting comments at the World Economic Forum, you know, the one in Davos.
Yeah, of course.
Basically, she warned that just outright seizing these assets could have some major unintended consequences. Like, it could really destabilize global financial markets.
That sounds a little ominous. What exactly do we mean by unintended consequences in this context? Can you give us some specifics?
Sure. So think of it like a chain reaction. You seize the assets, and then Russia might retaliate. They could cut off gas supplies to Europe, something they've done before, or they could even launch cyber attacks against Western financial institutions. And those actions, they wouldn't just impact Russia and the West. It could send shockwaves through the entire global economy, affecting everything from investments to the prices we pay for, well, almost everything.
Oh, wow. Okay. I see what you mean about the domino effect there.
Yeah.
So in a way, it's not just about punishing Russia. It's also about making sure we don't inadvertently make things worse for everyone.
Precisely. It's all about finding that balance. Now, to be fair, Urban isn't saying these assets should just sit there forever. She actually suggests that they could be used as leverage in any potential peace negotiations between Russia and Ukraine.
Interesting. So like a bargaining chip. Okay, that makes sense strategically, but it sounds like there's still disagreement about how to actually go about doing this.
Absolutely. There are some officials who are pushing for just taking the assets, like just confiscating them and saying that Russia needs to pay for the damage they've inflicted on Ukraine. That's definitely one side of the argument. But there are others who are urging caution, saying we need to really think this through and consider all the options so that we don't accidentally escalate the situation further. It's a delicate dance.
A delicate dance is a good way to put it. And on top of that, Urban brought up another important point. She argues that if we do end up confiscating those assets, we also need to transfer the associated liabilities. So, first of all, can you explain what she means by liabilities here? I think that might be a word that trips some people up.
Sure. So liabilities, in simple terms, they're like financial obligations. Think of it this way. Imagine someone invested in a Russian bond through Euroclear. Now, if Russia ends up defaulting on that bond and the asset gets confiscated, who's left holding the bag? Who has to cover that investor's loss? Urban is saying that it shouldn't fall on Euroclear to do that. They weren't the ones who caused the default, so they shouldn't be the ones who have to foot the bill.
Right. It makes sense when you put it like that. Sort of like inheriting a house, but then finding out there's a giant mortgage attached to it that you didn't know about.
Yeah, that's a great analogy. And Urban actually uses a real-world example to illustrate this point. She points to the frozen Iranian assets from way back when. Even all these years later, there are still legal battles and complications stemming from those frozen assets. So her point is, this isn't just about what happens right now. It's about setting a precedent, and we need to make sure that whatever we decide to do won't come back to bite us 10 or 20 years down the road.
Okay, so lots to consider there. But what about the European Union's position on all of this? I mean, they've obviously been a key player in imposing sanctions against Russia.
Right. And the EU's economy commissioner, his name is Valdis Dombrovskis, has been pretty vocal. He's said that they're not just thinking about freezing assets. They're actively looking into the possibility of seizing them, actually taking ownership as a way to compensate Ukraine for all the damage they've suffered from the war.
So that means full-on confiscation is definitely on the table, but I'm sensing it's not going to be a simple process. What are some of the hurdles they're facing?
Well, the biggest one is that full confiscation. It raises all sorts of complicated legal issues under international law. So the EU has to tread carefully. They know that whatever they do here could set a precedent, and they don't want to do something that could backfire in the future.
It's kind of like they're trying to navigate a minefield. But, just to be clear, they are still actively helping Ukraine financially, right? I mean, they are using some of the profits from these frozen assets to provide aid.
Oh, absolutely. For now, the EU's approach is focused on utilizing those profits, the ones generated from the sanctioned assets, to support Ukraine. It's a more cautious approach for sure, but the big question is, what's the long-term strategy? And that's still a matter of intense debate.
Makes sense. So, cautious steps from the EU. But how about the G7? Where do they stand on this?
Well, the G7 has actually taken things a step further. They've given the green light to a plan that uses the profits from those frozen Russian assets to back a loan package for Ukraine. A pretty substantial package, too. We're talking 50 billion. So it's a pretty clear sign that Kyiv's allies are committed to helping Ukraine recover.
50 billion euros. That's a serious chunk of change. It really shows you how big this situation is. So let me see if I can sum this all up. We've got these frozen assets potentially being used as bargaining chips in negotiations, but there's also this real risk of unintended consequences if we make the wrong move. And then on top of that, there's this huge debate about whether we should go for full confiscation or just stick to using the generated profits to help Ukraine. Did I get it all?
I'd say you nailed it. And I think what really fascinates me about this is how it forces us to think beyond the immediate crisis. In a way, these frozen assets are a problem, a big one, but maybe they're also an opportunity. Could we find some other way to use these assets? A way that not only helps Ukraine recover, but also maybe even helps stabilize the global financial system? That's what I keep coming back to.
That is a really thought-provoking question. And I have to say, this deep dive has been a real eye-opener. It just highlights how interconnected everything is. Global finance, geopolitics, you name it.
Yeah.
And even conflicts that seem far away can end up affecting us all in some way. Thanks for joining us today, everyone, and keep those brains buzzing. Until next time, stay curious.
Absolutely.
See you in the next deep dive.
Looking forward to it.